Um, yeah. Within the past 24 hours, I had another blowout, as I like to call them. Um, I, I'm sort of glad that it happened though, because the way everything happened, I got to see that, like during the day, when the sun is up, I'm much less likely to have a blowout than I am after dark or when I'm very tired. So what this tells me is that I can actually actively choose to only socialize during the day, um, or to only socialize when I'm well rested and in a comfortable situation, and potentially I'll be able to avoid blowouts. And what I mean by blowouts is situations where people are saying and doing things that stimulate a lack of trust in me. I used to think that this was their fault, but I'm increasingly realizing that it may not be, or that it probably isn't, because what I find is that the majority of people who provoke these blowouts in me seem to be getting along just fine with other people. It's only really me that seems to be struggling with them a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes it is just that everyone's having a tough time with them, but not always. And um, another realization I've had about myself is that I feel even though I've largely been able to unlearn this sensation, I still feel a very high sense of obligation to people around me in ways that are actually counterproductive. Like, even though I'm still under such severe lockdowns, and even though I know that the severity of the lockdowns is contributing to mental health problems for myself, I'm still for some reason expecting myself to perform and function as if none of this were happening. Like, which is a ridiculous expectation to hold of anyone. Like, it just doesn't make sense to think, oh, something as radical as COVID-19 can be going on and everyone's gonna just be fine. Like, that is totally, it's unfair to expect that of anybody. Like, if somebody came to me and said, oh, I'm so sorry that I didn't do such and such because, I was stressed out over COVID, and, and then, I would think it's ridiculous, like, it would be ridiculous for me to be angry at that person. So why am I feeling like I have to anticipate people being mad at me? Like, I mean, I still want to try to serve my customers well as they come in. Um, and, on that end, right behind me right now is a dress which I completed, but then I've taken a closer look at it in the light of day and realized I haven't sewn the collar to my standards. So I'm gonna actually redo it. Um, but my point in saying this is that I think that the level of stress that I generate for myself by perceiving these obligations is disproportionate to the situation, and not just disproportionate, but being that stressed isn't actually helping me to work better. It's actually just making me tired and irritable and self-conscious and insecure, and it's meaning that I'm having to sit here and do this additional mental health work for myself, which I wouldn't have to do if I was, if I was just thinking, okay, I'm gonna just do what I need to do to stay mentally healthy. I'm not gonna worry about this. And if I think back, when lockdowns were first happening, and I was putting my mental health first, and letting everything come second, everything else, I was doing really, really well. I was doing really well back then. And I was doing well for a long time, and I was doing well long after other people had stopped being fine. I mean, I always have some issues with anxiety and whatnot, but, I was still doing really well. What changed that was once I started hearing about people saying, oh, even though it's COVID-19, I've still been pushing myself to achieve these goals and I'm achieving these amazing things. And, it made me feel like, oh, I'm wasting my life, I'm wasting my time, I better, try to get myself going again and getting myself doing all these amazing things. And when the truth is, it's just ridiculous to expect that. Like, everybody knows the economy's going bad, and yet for some reason I'm feeling like it's somehow my fault that my store is not doing well right now. Like, no, everybody has said that we should expect the economy to suffer, and therefore, for a lot of online retailers to, all retailers really, to struggle. And yet I'm still, feeling self-conscious because my store isn't doing well right now. Like, it's just ridiculous. Having a tough time doesn't make me a selfish person. Like, it's selfish for people to be mad at me for having a tough time, really. But yeah, like, I've continued to try to talk to people on Discord, and I've always found Discord really challenging, like a really tough place to be. Not just because at first I was still learning how to, just use it, like that was hard. But even as I've gone on to gradually get used to how things work in Discord, I still find I hit little bumps in the road, in that I feel like as a social medium, Discord demands levels of trust that I'm not currently capable of. In that people will post things, and it's not like Facebook where you'll get likes and comments. It's its own separate thing where people won't necessarily respond. And I hate that. I feel like it's so rude to see somebody post something and then not react. And so I often, will go out of my way to react. And yeah, I mean, I've tried to learn to be giving people the benefit of the doubt and to just try to accept that the medium doesn't work that way. And I've started to relax that behavior of mine to sort of just not respond as much, and to sometimes even willfully make the decision to not respond so that I can get used to how the culture works there. But I'm conflicted, because what I find is that when I start to treat people in Discord as rudely as I feel that they're treating me, again, in these efforts to try to integrate, they get mad at me sometimes. Like, they start to feel like I'm ignoring them or hiding from them or running from them. And, so a lot of time, for example, a lot of the time I will just have myself appearing to be offline even if I'm not. Just because I don't want people to think that I'm just online yet ignoring them. Because if I leave it online by default, I know that I'm going to have times where I'm going to just fall asleep and forget to change the setting, or I'm going to, leave the room and go to the bathroom or have a shower, or, and just forget to change it, and then people will be trying to reach out to me, and maybe they'll feel like I'm ignoring them. And I don't want people to have to feel that way. I actually do a lot to try to not make people feel like I'm ignoring them, because I know how much it hurts to feel ignored. But even as I say this, I'm conflicted, because what I've read in some places is that if you really hate being ignored, it's a sign of having narcissistic personality disorder. But then in other places I read that when you're feeling ignored, it's actually normal to experience feelings of depression, and depression is extreme. It's not a little bit of sadness. It's a sense of existential dread. It's a sense of questioning whether your life is worth living. It's not small, and so You know what I mean? I feel conflicted when I'm reading about mental illness, because sometimes it seems like the things that they're saying are signs of mental illness are actually very normal, natural emotional responses. So when I'm in these situations and I find myself having these intense negative emotional reactions to what I feel is being ignored, I'm conflicted about how I should feel. Like, are these people, I mean, I'm learning that these people aren't acting this way because they want me to feel tortured. But at the same time, I do have moments where I get tired and I feel like people are dodging me or ignoring me or avoiding me. And yeah, so I end up feeling, hurt again, and it makes me sometimes say and do things that I regret. Like last night, I got all excited because there was talk of games, and like for a few days in a row, I'd seen people start up games that they know I love playing, and then but they started it up while I was asleep, and then by the time I got there, it was nearly over, and I just, having this happen more than once in a row, it was frustrating. But then to finally get my sleep schedule in a place where I could be there for those games and then have the games not happen, it started to feel very much like there might have been people who were trying to, who just didn't want to play with me and were therefore going out of their way to only have these games going when I wasn't around, or only have fun conversations happening when I wasn't around. But then I think back, and I remember having this boyfriend who used to feel like I was way more popular than him, and I was getting all these lovely Facebook notifications, and he was feeling ignored. But when I looked at him, I felt like he had a lot of friends around him who were paying him wonderful attention, and I sometimes felt like, why can't I be more popular and sociable like him? Why can't I be more extroverted? And so I'm inclined to suspect that people are just predisposed to feel more like they're being ignored than they actually are. Like that their perspective on what's happening and what is actually happening will sometimes differ. Which leads me to another anxiety that's been on my mind. I got very, very close to attempting to, sit that friend who I'd been talking about down, and to try to say to him, well, because I've seen signs in the things he and I have said to each other that our feelings about each other don't seem to be 100% platonic. Like, I'm willing to say 95% platonic maybe, but not 100%. And I feel a need to, like, talk to him about it and look at what that 5% might mean over the long term. Like, are we going to try to grow that? Are we going to try to shrink that? Are we going to just act like it's not there and live our lives? What's. And even as I say this, I don't know whether that's even a question that needs asking, or a conversation that needs to be had. It's just that in life, in my experience, being in that place of not 100% knowing where you stand with somebody seems to be dangerous. Because you can't predict the emotional attachments that might form over time, and if you're not on the same page about where things are going, there's a very big potential for people to get hurt. And I really want to avoid that. Not just, like, admittedly, he doesn't strike me as a very sentimental person, which is partly why in the past I've denied the notion of there being any possibility for a relationship. But in conversations I've had with him more recently, I'm inclined to think that maybe my assessment of him was incorrect. And maybe there is potential there. And so, I wanted to sit him down and talk about that. But then, I ended up thinking, hang on, Shona. You don't, like, you don't really know what's going on with this person. Because if I think back over all of my interactions with him, the fact that I suspect that he's been gaslighting me is a very big problem in some ways. I mean, admittedly, I could give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, maybe this is benevolent, maybe it means nothing, maybe I'm, because if I think overall about the things that he's said to me and the attention that he's paid and admittedly he is somewhat inattentive, but that might not be coming from a place of malevolence, and the things that he has actually said to me leaves me little cause to think that it's malevolent, because in the things he's actually said to me, he has been supportive, and in fact more supportive than some of the friends I've had who are more responsive. He's actually, like when I was going through times where I was feeling unsure or insecure, instead of encouraging me to feel more insecure, which is what some more talkative friends did, these are people who I don't really consider to be friends anymore. Like I know I should forgive, and I'm trying to forgive them. I'm trying so hard, but I still feel very hurt and angry actually. But He was one of the few friends, like this guy I'm talking about really, he was one of the few friends that didn't make me feel like an idiot for feeling the way I felt. He was one of the few people who I felt believed me at my claims, instead of just telling me that I'm, seeing things or that I'm crazy. And if I think back over what made the things I was going through last year so hard, it was that so many people were doubting me and telling me, well, not directly telling me, but there was a lot that was being said and done that implied that I was just nuts. And, this was even coming from people who claimed to be my friends. And so having his support during that time really stood out to me, actually. And like the fact that he was one of the few people who actually offered me sound advice stood out to me. But then, if he is gaslighting me at the same time, I don't know what to think, because how do these two traits coexist of gaslighting somebody, which is like a radical form of psychological terrorism, and at the same time, he's nice and supportive, like. And it's not like he's a social misfit. Like, I've seen him get along with people really well. And there are people who know about abuse who would counter-argue, well, abusers, often have a lot of friends and get along with a lot of people, and they just pick specific people to abuse. And people who often get abused often are abused by a lot of different people because they're that sort of person that provokes that kind of personality type to do that. But in my dealings with him, I don't get the vibe that he is that type of person. If I think back over all of the conversations I've had with him and everything that's been said and done, the sensation I get about him is that he is largely a benevolent person. He might have a naughty side, but I don't think he's evil. And with that being the case, like the thing is the issue he's gaslighting me on is the question of what his sexuality actually is, and it can very easily be argued that that's none of my fucking business. Like, what he has going on in his private life is totally up to, like, it. I have no say in that, and I shouldn't. It should be up to him. But realistically, I sort of feel like it'd be so easy for him to just sit me down and tell me the truth, and I feel like I haven't given him much cause to think that I'm a homophobe. I think that I've given him ample reason to think that I'm very tolerant. And, if I think about the context of when he began to make these claims of having a sexuality which the things I had seen of him did not match up with, it was at a point where I had started to maybe too loudly describe him as gay. And, it could very well be that he's actually, pansexual, or that he's actually trans, and therefore, if he's involved with a man, it's not gay, it's straight, it's, there's a lot of, I understand that there's a spectrum of different things going on out there, and I don't know where he is on that, and maybe it's none of my business, and I therefore shouldn't ask him, and maybe that's why he's not explaining anything to me. But that would logically follow if he was just maintaining a campaign of silence, which is not what he's been doing. He has actively been trying to rewrite the history that I've seen. He's been effectively trying to reprogram my brain to not remember the things I saw, or to believe things about the things I saw and heard, which are just not the truth. And, I remember being so scared to lose him as a friend before. But if he is deceiving me to this extent, losing him as a friend is not really a bad thing, I think. Because it means he's not as nice as I thought he was, maybe, and the truth is, this is hard, because I'm used to being around the sort of abusive personality that uses anger as a way of controlling people. I'm less familiar with the style of abusive personality that solely resorts to psychological manipulation. And so I don't... You know what I mean? It's harder for me to predict a long-term outcome for this situation. However, with that being said, something that dawned on me recently, I was thinking about the things that I had read and heard about the concept of delayed gratification. And what that means is, whether or not a person basically has a capacity for patience, whether or not they can work hard at a goal where they're not going to see a reward for a very long time, but when they get to that reward, it's going to be great. Or whether they're the sort of person who will work for a short time for a smaller, more immediate goal, and, they'll be going after that because they don't have the patience for the longer goal. And studies were done, into children with this concept, and the thing that I know about myself is that in of myself, I am capable of delayed gratification. Like, I know myself, and I know that if I was tested in the same way those children were as a child, I would have performed well in that test. But what I find is that within my relationships, I don't function the way people who are like that typically do. People who are good with delayed gratification typically perform well in every aspect of life. They perform well in their careers, they perform well in their relationships, they perform better throughout life in general because they have that inner patience and that willingness to work towards the greater goal. But yeah, I haven't really seen so much of that in my own life because, when I'm working in my business, for example, it's very hard for me to keep going towards something when I don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel. Admittedly, that's different from the test that was being done, though. Like, the way they test kids for delayed gratification is they'll put them in a room alone with a marshmallow on a plate, and they'll say to the child, okay, don't eat the marshmallow until the alarm goes off, and then you will have 2 marshmallows you can eat. But if you eat the marshmallow before the alarm goes off, you only get that marshmallow. That's all you get to have. And they leave the child alone with the alarm. And I feel very much as though as a child, I would have, sat there patiently. Admittedly, I don't think I loved marshmallows enough to care, but I feel like I would have had the patience to wait if I had understood the test. But that's different from how real life works, in that the child was guaranteed an additional marshmallow upon waiting. Life does not work that way. You can work very hard at a goal and never see a result in your lifetime, unfortunately. Like, okay, not necessarily no result. I mean, it's almost impossible to do any kind of work and see zero results. It's just that you might not see the results you want or need in order to be considered a functional and viable human being. And similarly, in your relationships, you can take the right steps and be really nice and do all the right things for your partner, but in the end, ultimately, if they decide to leave you for somebody else, that's out of your hands. You won't necessarily get the goal you wanted of a great lifelong relationship. And I think that's what trips me up. Like, I feel like if when it comes to my friendships, if I could have some guarantee that if I just kept my cool when they were doing things that to me seemed questionable or threatening, I would be able to keep my cool. I would just be like, yeah, okay, I'll just wait this out. But because I have no guarantees, it's different. The fact that abusive personalities as a concept exist means that I think I have to eye everybody with this level of suspicion that is maybe sometimes disproportionate to what's actually happening in front of me. Like, and this is something that I've tried to talk out with other people to try to get their perspective on it so that I can maybe better understand how most people maintain friendships and relationships. And the answer that they gave me, and it's an answer that turns up a lot in terms of relationship counseling, in terms of psychological work, is this idea that loving somebody really means letting them be themselves, even their imperfect selves. And like as I was walking around having my morning walk today, I found myself thinking about how, yeah, even though popular culture, when I was growing up, told women that you could somehow avoid bad relationships and have good ones by being judgmental and impatient and demanding, that, you would chase away all the bad partners and somehow bring all of the good partners into your life magically. Like that. But the statistics show if you're patient, if you're tolerant, if you're kind, you're much more likely to have good relationships. And I'm not sure whether that's because women who are intensely distrusting are just so emotionally damaged that they're incapable of discerning good men from evil men, or whether it's because their ability to manage their relationships is so heavily impaired that they just can't carry out a healthy relationship. Or maybe it's a combination of the two. I don't know enough about psychology to answer that. But what I know is that in these situations where I'm being so unforgiving and so distrusting, I'm not really being who I want to be. Like, I'm not really being like a Christian. Like, if I think about what standards God would hold me to, in terms of trust, in terms of faith, in terms of forgiveness, he would be like, absolutely, forgive these people, trust these people, do your best to just love these people as they are, try to just accept them where they're at, give them the grace that I've given you. And I want to be able to do that, I really do. But it's so hard. It is so hard. I've been talking for nearly half an hour, and I feel like the whole question of how do you become a more forgiving, more tolerant person is not there's no simple answer to that, I feel like. But, like, even now I'm thinking, do I want to go back into the Discord and just try to hang out like everything's normal? Or do I want to just stay away and wait it out until I'm feeling a bit more calm and a bit more secure? And the truth is, I don't feel like I've been giving myself enough introvert time lately. Like, there's this book that's over on the table that I keep wanting to read, and I've been wanting to read it for months, but I never get round to it because I'm just always, like, preoccupied with one thing or another. And the argument could very well be made, well, Shona, you're not making enough to live on, so technically you should be, focusing on trying to make money and then worry about the fun things later. But on another level, if I think back to when I was letting myself just do whatever made me mentally healthy and I didn't worry about my work as much, I was working more effectively. Admittedly, I wasn't working as many hours, but those hours were spent much more efficiently, and it was just easier for me to work because my mind was actually able to focus on what I was doing. So, yeah, I mean, I have this dress and I have the mug designs I have to do, which are both time sensitive, but I think other than that, I'm not going to give myself much else to do. I mean, okay, yeah, I'm going to have to sooner or later make another reusable bag for the bathroom, which frustrates me because if my mother was just letting me manage my garbage the way I wanted to, I wouldn't have to do this. But yeah, it seems the only way I can get her to leave my garbage alone and let me manage it the way I want is if I create these fabric bags to keep the trash in instead of letting her use the plastic bags. And I hate it. It irritates me so much when she uses the plastic bags and then just throws them away, because the whole reason we've got a bag ban right now is that these bags keep going into landfill and then hurting wildlife, and I don't want to be complicit in that. I don't want to be personally responsible just because she's, usurping some of the basic controls that I have over my own life. And this has been a great source of frustration and anger for me. Like, not just in this situation, but it's like a theme over my lifetime where there's ordinary amounts of control that a person is meant to have over their life, and she just abducts that from me. But then, one of the things that has come out of me being in the Discord is hearing these stories about how awful other people's parents sometimes are. And yeah, I mean, historically I've had a tendency to compare my parents to emotionally healthy parents, and find them having shortcomings. But when I compare them to parents who I consider to be, if I'm honest, physically abusive and potentially immature and sadistic, they actually seem like pretty good parents. I mean, yeah, they're deeply flawed, but at the very least I can say that my mother didn't beat me any more than necessary. That she actually beat me very rarely, and I think part of the reason I have the level of emotional intelligence that I have now is thanks to the fact that she did that. Because if I look at the people that I've been trying to get along with in the Discord group, part of the reason I'm struggling so hard is that they seem to be, like, maybe I'm misunderstanding their behavior, but to me their behavior comes across as severely empathy impaired, and even a bit elitist, and sometimes a bit snobbish and exclusive. And I feel like emotionally healthy people don't behave these ways. I feel like emotionally healthy people are, that they try harder to be understanding and giving and forgiving. And as I say that must sound so judgmental of these people, when I don't feel that way. Actually, when I consider the ways that they've told me their parents treated them, I feel really, like, genuinely sorry that they had to be beaten that much and things like that. I actually, yeah. But it's like I'm getting to see a real-time study. My mother raised me without corporal punishment for the most part. And I've grown up to at least have this strong sense of empathy. Whereas, studies have demonstrated that kids who were beaten often as children often grow up to be empathy impaired adults. And I'm getting to, in some ways, see that as a truth in the Discord group. And as I say that, I don't mean to suggest that I'm necessarily better than these people. I don't think I am. A lot of them are much smarter than me. They seem to be much more accomplished materialistically. But that's the thing. Like, if I was going to pick between having a child who was materialistically just terrible at managing their life, but they still had a really big heart and a really strong sense of ethics, versus, raising a child who's, really great at managing money and working and studying, but they're heartless and they're very shallow. They don't care about the deeper emotional things. I would rather raise that kid with who's stupid with a big heart. Like, that's who I'd rather be in of myself as well. So I guess in a sense, like, as messed up as my childhood was in a lot of ways, I'm still grateful to my mum that she didn't hit me. Yeah. That's what's on my mind right now.